Namaste. Haribo Aloha. My name is Janapati Das. And a little bit. Tonight is the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita as it is. We will be discussing the philosophy and the wisdom of this wonderful book translated by my spiritual grandfather A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, entitled Bhagavad Gita as it is, because it is a authorized reading of the Bhagavad Gita and purports by His Divine Grace. So if you have not bought this copy of Bhagavad Gita, if you go to the store and you're looking for a great book of wisdom, the Bhagavad Gita as it is, don't pick the other ones because those are generally not authorized. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is in a long line of disciplined, spiritual, self-realized spiritual teachers. And so I would like to take this moment to offer my respects to you for tuning in tonight. I'd like to take the opportunity also to offer my most humble obeisances unto my spiritual teacher, the disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, Jagat Guru Siddha Swarupananda Srila Prabhupada, Paramahamsa Prabhupada, who taught me everything I know about that I'm going to be teaching tonight. So I'd like to offer my most humble respects to him. And we're going to start off tonight by engaging in kirtan, the hearing or repeating of Krishna's names as instructed by the great saintly teachers. And so what I'd like you to do is to join along with me. Second time through, sing back with me. First time through, just sit back and listen. And take it into your heart, the names of Krishna.
Swabhupaya
Krishna, Haribol, Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Namini, Kodakara Swarupaya Krishna. Okay, welcome. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We will be reading from the Bhagavad Gita. Tonight we're gonna talk about a lot of different exciting things about the reality of our existence as spirit souls, as jivatmas, spiritual in essence, and more about the material coverings of the body, including the gross physical body and the subtle body. And we're going to read from the Bhagavad Gita, citing a couple different chapters, and so I'm just going to get right into that. As we recall, the premise of this discourse between Krishna and Arjuna was that Krishna was teaching Arjuna about so many different things in the Bhagavad Gita, and ultimately about surrender to himself, surrender to God, surrender to Krishna is the highest form of religion. It's the highest form of our existence, and it is the Bhagavad Gita. It is the Song of God. That is our relationship. But one of the first things that Krishna teaches Arjuna, after he goes through these different various reasons of why he shouldn't have to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra and kill his siblings and whatnot, Krishna tells him that never was there a time. He's saying, well, first of all, never was there a time when you or I did not exist, nor has there ever been a time when we didn't exist, or when we will cease to exist. He goes on to say, for the soul there is neither birth nor death, nor having once been, does it ever cease to be, right? It is eternal, ever existing, primeval, all these different terms. In the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about the spirit soul, the living entity, not being able to be cut into pieces, not, immutable, eternal, it's not destroyed when the body is destroyed, so many things like that. So when we get to chapter 7, and we've read these verses a couple times, Krishna tells Arjuna about the nature of the different kinds of material coverings, the difference between spirit and matter here. And this is in text 4, chapter 7. Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, altogether these comprise my separated material energies, right? So he lays out all those, and we'll get into that in a minute. And then he goes on to say, besides this inferior nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is a superior energy of mine, which are all living entities who are struggling with material nature and sustaining the universe. So it's a very important point, because as Krishna has told Arjuna already, that there wasn't, that the living entity is not the material body. That's the very basic spiritual life 101. Who are you, right? We are not this material body. We are not the subtle body of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, as it said in here. But we are this living entity, and we are struggling. The word in Sanskrit, his word is used as karsati, which has to do with grappling or struggling with the material energy. And this is very true about what the living entity is doing under illusion in this material world, trying to enjoy through their senses for their own enjoyment as the Supreme Lord themselves, a perceived Lord of themselves, attempt to find some kind of happiness, this pursuit of happiness, as the word to say. Not real happiness, but actually a pursuit of happiness. And also, we can summarize back into chapter 2, after that, never was there a time, right, that we did not exist. Krishna goes on to say, as the embodied soul, and I'm going to find it here, I'm going to quote it, right? Devina shmin yata dehe kamaram yavanam jara tata dehar hantara praptir dirash tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul. So that already states that the living entity is embodied in these casings of different subtle and gross material elements. It continually passes in the body, and this we've seen right through if you look at your baby photos of yourself. You see you're in a little body, and then we have different bodies as we go on throughout the age. Some of a young boy or young girl, and some maybe as an adult, some as a middle age, and then eventually as an older, and then dwindles. They've already done these studies scientifically that show that the chemical makeup and the molecular makeup, completely 100% of the body, has a complete changeover every 3 to 5 years. So that the body, every atom and every molecule in our body has constantly changed over up to probably 7 or 8 times in your lifetime. So the body that I had when I was 5 is gone, right? It's made up of into other different material elements. So this is the way that matter moves. It fluidly moves in our body. The living entity is present within the body, observing, as it says also in the Bhagavad Gita, as if it's seated on a machine, right? Where we're present within the body, we're making the body move, and these things. So continuing from this text 13, so it says, the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age. The soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such change. And so the word dira is the word that it has to do with the self-realized soul. In other words, the self-realized soul is a sober person. This is this word diras. This is sober. You know, you think of a person who's sober, very clear-headed, they have a very clear vision of things. They're not, when you're drunk, you're kind of like all over the place, and it's kind of funny. Because I think about, my past when I used to drink a lot, now I don't drink anymore, but, you would wonder about those people in the party who were the sober ones and what they were experiencing, and then until you are the sober person and you see the drunk person in the party and what kind of fools that they make. They have no control over their body or what their speech is. They're just blurting out stuff. I love you, like, you know what I think? Right? Or if you see a drunk in the street, they're just like, you know what I think? They're just like completely out of control. But a sober person has a clear vision. So this is why they use this word diras, because the self-realized soul, the pure devotee of Krishna, the pure lover of Krishna, has a clear vision about the nature of this material world. And this is what we're going to get into. We're going to continue reading through chapter 15. I just wanted to touch on these 2 verses in this chapter 7, because it has to do with the difference between the matter, gross matter, and subtle matter, right? The earth, water, fire, air, ether, as we get more and more subtle, right? Earth, water is a little bit more subtle, fire is more subtle, air is more subtle than that, ether is space, so it's more subtle than that, but it's still material energy. And then we start to get into a very subtle, the mind, the intelligence, and ahankara, false ego. So false ego is also, as we know, this idea that I am this body, I am this mind, I am this identity, this sex, this whatever orientation, whatever designation that we put on this body. I'm American. I'm tall. I'm short. I'm fat. I'm skinny. I'm old. I'm young. Whatever it might be, it has to do with the body. But to say that that is me is an error, an illusion. And so this is laid out very clearly by Krishna to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And we're going to read more because there's this correlation. This is a wonderful thing about the Bhagavad Gita. It's like this great net or great web of wisdom that connects, the concepts connect to each other. So in chapter 15, text 7, Krishna goes on to say, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Excuse me. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. I'm going to read a few more of these verses because it's very important. The living entity in the material world carries his different conception of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. That connects to that verse 13 about the living entity moving through the body and going into another body at the end. We'll get into that a little bit in a second. A living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, tongue, and nose and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature, but one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So actually Krishna is saying that a person who is foolish, or mudra, right, foolish person, is a person who doesn't understand this concept. Completely illusioned by the energy around them, the material energy, the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance around them, the false ego, Maya Devi, everything in this that operates in this material energy, including our own body, is completely bewildering the living entity into thinking that they are they are this and they are Lord in this realm. But they say the foolish, and even Krishna called Arjuna, while speaking like a learned man, you're actually acting like a fool. What he says early on, right? You're acting like very foolish because you are laying out all these arguments with the concept that somehow or another your body, Arjuna, is who you are, and that everybody on the battlefield are your relatives, but they're not your relatives. They're just playing the part of your relatives. They're actually my eternal servants, as you are, eternally spiritual entity, temporarily in this body, playing out this sort of illusory carnival, I guess you could say. I think of a couple of analogies, because I was thinking about this today, that there's two things. One is this idea of, I think in Pinocchio, when Pinocchio goes to the carnival and everybody starts to, I think even he does, starts to turn into a donkey by this, this carnival and enjoyment, and everybody starts to turn into an ass by getting stuck there, and they're trapped in there. But it's also in another story called the Pilgrim's Progress. Maybe if you haven't heard of that, you can look that up. It's a really nice Christian old novel story of maybe from 400, 500 years ago, and they have a similar thing in the spiritual quest where there's a city where people get caught up and they just enjoy and they forget their path, what they're doing, their goal in their life. And so this is very important to make this point that we can't be broad-sided when we have a human form of life. It's a very valuable time to actually take to spiritual life and to realizing, remembering our relationship with God and our true eternal Sanatan Dharma, our eternal function of what we should be doing. Otherwise, we're continually lost in this samsara, reincarnating in this material world, thinking that, as they say here, taking on different kinds of, taking the aromas of what we've done in this life. And there is a real science to this, and that is the living entities covered by all these subtle and gross elements have a certain kind of enjoyment. So we've come to a human body. We have the opportunity that is not able to do in any other form of life, animal or plant, to inquire about spiritual life. And so if we don't take to that, we will go back into an animal form of life. And this is because if we're using our senses in the service of our own, we start to shape, with our mind, we shape our future body. And with our body, right now, we shape the mind, which shapes the future body. So, for example, you see sometimes people are just engaged in sort of a mode of ignorance, kind of enjoyment of just drinking and eating meat and sex life, and that they may be acting like a dog, so that they are actually molding with their mind. The mind is being molded, the subtle body is being molded into the future shape of a dog, so that in our next life, because we are taking those desires, we were engaging in those kinds of desires, we will, nature will take Krishna's energies have made it so that whatever we want in our life, we want to enjoy like a dog, because that's how we are engaging in this life. We want to have that propensity, so we can go and we can have the body of a dog in the next life, engage in that, and then try to find our happiness in the pursuit of happiness in that form of a dog. And this is how the material world works. As long as we want to lord over material nature and try to enjoy it, this is where we will be. It's kind of like it's a very important point, because some of these things that Bhaktivedanta, and I'm going to read some of these, make it very clear, because a lot of times I get the argument of like, well, why doesn't God has the ability to make us, see him and see what we're doing that is wrong, and just in an instant. Sure, he does if he wanted to, but it's kind of like, as it's stated in here, I'm going to read actually some of this purport, and that'll make it a little bit clearer, that it's actually the living entity is responsible for its own perceived pleasure, and also for its own consequences of those karmic reactions. So, excuse me a second. And so here Bhaktivedanta Swami says, after this text of the living entity of the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas, right? Like when you walk by a bakery, you smell the bakery goods, the croissants, and you smell those because the food particles are floating in the air. You smell those, right? You smell it in your nose. Similarly, the actions and reactions of what you've done in your life is getting carried into the next life, as is stated in that the soul moving through the body, right? It's carrying all these things that we're doing with it and the karmic reactions with it. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. So that's pretty laid out. We have a little bit of independence, right? We are the controller of our body. We've been allotted this body in this life. We have a certain amount of responsibility to treat it in the right, correct way. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move it to a lower class. So there, Bhaktivedanta is laying out very clearly that we have made that decision to go to a lower class, and we have to pay the piper, so to speak. If we are suffering because of karmic reaction, it's because we've made decisions. It's a pretty straightforward concept in general. The decisions you make warrant the consequences that come along with them. So where you are is generally made because of the decisions you've chosen in your life. In most cases, minute independence is there. So that we have a little bit of independence, because we are a living entity. We are the same energy as Krishna in quality, not quantity, but quality, right? And so therefore we have this desire to have a little bit of independence, just because Krishna is the supreme independent. So Krishna allots us a little bit of independence to make a choice, right? You can do this, you can do that, right? The change of his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him onto the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, he's sure to change to a cat's or dog's body. That's very straightforward. So it's a wonderful philosophy. It's wonderful truth, because it explains things very, very clearly, and justice is served every time. So sometimes people are, they say they get away with murder. No, they don't get away with murder. They may get away with it in this life by the law, but by the divine law, they will have to pay for what they've done eventually. It's kind of like a bank account. You put something in, you have good karma, you do good deeds, you have good karma, you have to pay it back, that pays back, you have to earn that somehow. If you have bad karma, then and you do something, it will come back to you eventually in some way or another. But then beyond that, beyond the good or bad karma, we don't want the good or bad karma. We want to go beyond karma, and that is in our loving service to our spiritual teacher and to Krishna consciousness. And in that consciousness, we are actually in our real consciousness, because that does not accrue any kind of karma. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after annihilation of this body, everything is finished. Another argument that's made, and another illusion that's so prevalent among people. They think, they have these sayings like, life's a bitch and then you die, or whatever, or you've got to enjoy life until you die, or bop till you drop. It's like they think, well, this is the one shot we have. We only have, you have one time, and then it's over. And a lot of that's kind of an atheistic thought, that you're gonna only kind of come into existence from who knows where, and you're gonna disappear. But what consciousness is, nobody really knows. They just think it's some kind of chemical reaction of the brain and whatnot. But even science shows that it can't be replicated. Nobody in science knows what consciousness really is. They have no idea. The smart scientists know that it's beyond science. That consciousness has to do with the living entity, spiritual. And so the living entity present within the body actually gives consciousness to the body. It's not the other way around. And so this is a false claim that, when your body is done, that everything is done. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, going back to that other verse, right? And the present body and his present activities are the background of his next body. So this lays out the idea that, as the embodied soul continually passes through the one life to another, it will take on to another body at the time of death. If one is acting in the way of trying to enjoy and find happiness through their mind and senses, if one is able to use the mind in a correct way and use their senses in a correct way, there will be no continuation in this world. So let's read some more Bhaktivedanta, because I'm talking too much. I think it's better to read from the True Master. So we were reading, okay, going back here. In this verse, the identity, so this is the first verse that I read, the living entity in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So there was a couple Sanskrit words that we used, the word kashati, that you mentioned before, this idea of struggling or grappling, right? Just sort of the living entity is trying to manipulate the material energy in a way, and it's having a real hard time with it. I mean, all you got to do is look around. You watch your body as you get older just kind of fall apart. When you're young, you're like, that's great, and everything is great, and everything is wonderful. And I teach young people sometimes in schools, and they're just like carefree, and you try to tell them, well, things are gonna change, with your body and how things go in life, and they just don't want to hear it. They want to play and have fun, and so it just has to be one of those situations where they find out. But ideally, you can hopefully teach young people that this is what's coming up, and the real goal of life is to not waste yourself on frivolous desires of the world, and to really actually focus on spiritual pursuits now, because you really don't know how long you're going to be on this planet. So in this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. So they were talking about the living entities as being fragmental. And so I actually want to jump ahead to what Bhaktivedanta says here. The word mamishvamshaha, correct me if I'm wrong if I say that, it's a big Sanskrit word. Fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord is also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. So that's a very important thing to remember, because sometimes people who believe in monism, or that everybody is God and we can all remember that we're God, and this is a whole other philosophy in the yogic path, but it's incorrect, incomplete, and incorrect philosophy. But because they think, well, if it's fragmented and it's broken off, then actually the original source is actually less. But this is not the case, because the living entity, the spiritual energy, is not like material energy, right? The 1 + 1 is 1 in the spiritual world, right? Krishna is not lessened by the fact that we are fragmental, or we are minute spiritual entities. As stated in the 2nd chapter, we were actually small, infinitely small particles, but of the same quality. Like gold is the same, whether it's a large casket of gold or a giant statue of gold, or if it's just a small piece of gold, it's the same material qualities, right? So similarly, the living entities and the Supreme Lord are the same quality of spiritual energy, but not the same quantity. We are the dominated parts and parcels. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the 2nd chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. The fragment is not materially conceived. It's not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here, because the Sanskrit word sanatan, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the 2nd chapter that dehinos ninyata, in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. So that verse that is referred to is the one we were talking about, chapter 2, text 13, as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age. The soul similarly passes into another body at the time of death, and that the sober or the self-realized person is not bewildered by such a change when they know this. So that fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold. So yes, that's the statement about the gold from Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, making it very clear that our energy, the energy is the same, that we are truly spiritual, but we are illusioned in the idea of thinking that we are, through the false ego, we are thinking that we are this. We are, James, or we are Janapati, or we are, an American, or a Russian, or a girl, or a boy, or tall, or short, or fat, or this person, or that identity, or this, anything that has to do with the designation of the body. The body is a temporary. It is, as I said earlier, with the fact that the molecules and the atoms are continuously changing and moving through the body. It's constantly in flux. If you look at like these sort of time lapse photography, you see how quickly things move. Actually, we don't see the movement of things very, very quickly, because we're just sort of in it, But if you see things sped up, you see how they grow, they break down, they turn into soil, living entities come along and eat things, and it's a constant movement going on in our body, blood moving, urine, stool, pus, lymph moving through the body, different atoms moving in and out of the body, being rejected, some coming in through food, assimilating into the body, and then we watch the body eventually break down, but then the living entity continues on with these conceptions, these aromas, right? These sort of things that we've done in our life make a difference. So some more. So here, of course, the living entity thus taking another gross body, excuse me, obtains a certain type of ear, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. So the mind is driving this thing. So if the mind is, we're just going to enjoy this in a certain way, like maybe I want to enjoy like a worm does, and the way I act like whatever a worm may act, and that subtle body is being shaped to create a certain kind of ear, a certain kind of tongue, a certain kind of nose, a certain kind of sense of touch of a worm. We go through our life, and we've cultivated that, and when the living entity is ready to leave, it cannot leave because it has this shape that it needs to take on in its next life. So it takes on the life of a worm, and then great fortune in it to be a human and then go to a worm, because you had the opportunity as a human to comprehend. As a worm, you don't have the opportunity. You don't have the ability, I should say, to sit around, read Bhagavad Gita. Only if you're lucky and you hear the names of Krishna, then of course that's wonderful. Or if you eat some prasadam or something like that. But generally speaking, it's a pretty hellish existence. I'll read the purport here. In other words, if the living entity adulterates his consciousness, I love that word, adulterating his consciousness. That's pretty much what you're doing. You have this really wonderful ability to utilize your consciousness in the service of God. And instead, you decide to act like a dog, a cat, a worm, a fly, with your consciousness, just mixing mud into this pure consciousness. It says here, similarly, right, consciousness is originally pure. It is. It comes from Krishna. Like water. But if we mix water with a certain color, it changes. Similarly, consciousness is pure, for the spirit soul is pure, but consciousness is changed according to the association of material qualities. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. When therefore one is situated in Krishna consciousness, he is in his pure life. But if his consciousness is adulterated by some type of material mentality, in his next life he gets a corresponding body. So this is what is being said here, right? All kind of more in-depth explained from that second chapter, verse 13, of how the body moves through the body and gets on another body in the next life. How that happens is laid out pretty much here. He does not necessarily get a human body again. No, not necessarily at all. He can get a body of a cat, a dog, hog, demigod, or one of many other forms, for there are 8,400,000 species. There's a lot of species, but I'm sure it's probably been all of them at least once or twice, or maybe more, who knows. I'm just, you feel very fortunate when you come into contact with a representative of Krishna who can teach you about the absolute truth, and then you have the opportunity to get out of this cycle. So I feel very fortunate to have that experience. So the last one. Fools cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. You see this all around you. It's just like people, and even the kids that I work with, they're just so hyper focused on who they're dating and who they're, what games they can play and what they want to eat during class, and who said that, and that person did me wrong, and it's like so under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. And so it is about knowledge, and this is what Bhaktivedanta Swami says here. The word Gana Chakshusha is very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves this present body, nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he is living in a particular type of body, or for that matter, that they are that different body, that they're not the body that they're on. This requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literature is heard from a bona fide spiritual master. There it is right there. So without the spiritual master explaining the science of Bhagavad Gita to you, what Bhagavad Gita means, so it's not with our own power that we can actually ascend to the truth of what is really going on, although many people try to do through the forms of philosophy and great thinkers, and they're trying to, and sometimes they take that, it's kind of like one of those, when you have those track splits, they're like, okay, I know what the absolute truth is, and then they just go down the wrong way, and they're going further and further away, and they're just like on a track, and then somebody else gets on, and they're the successor, and my teacher was, Nietzsche, or, Freud, or something like that, and I'm going to keep going down this track with my papers, and then he has a disciple. But in the meantime, they're going down the wrong way because they've tried to, mentally put up the picture. But the problem is that their mind is fallible. The mind is fallible. We cannot understand the absolute truth through these imperfect senses that we actually have. So we need the pure representative of the spiritual master who is surrendered to his spiritual master, who is surrendered to the Bhagavad Gita, to the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita, and applied it in their life purely. One who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstances. He is living under a certain circumstance, enjoying under certain circumstances under the spell of material nature. Now, the great illusion, of course, is that nobody... It's kind of mind-blowing, actually, sometimes I think about it, that everybody is continuing on this road over a cliff, which is going to be death. They're thinking that if I just accumulate enough stuff, that if I just manipulate things in a certain way, I will beat the end. But it's like, my spiritual teacher used to say, it's like one of those games where they used to have in the 80s where you would accumulate, you get to do the sweepstakes where you get to, you got 5 minutes to gather all this stuff into your shopping cart, and then you can take it out at the end. But life is like that, except at the end you have to leave everything behind, including you. So it's that's the reality of these things, and the spell, the power of the material nature to just completely bewilder people into thinking that they can just keep doing what everybody else has done in the past, and they don't realize that everyone else has died before them. What has happened to those people? As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress, and the fact that they're not really getting that much happiness, but there's this perceived happiness, right? Under the illusion of sense enjoyment. Persons who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power of understanding their change of body and their stay in a particular body. They cannot comprehend it. Those who have developed spiritual knowledge, however, can see that the spirit is different from the body, and it is changing its body and enjoying in different ways. A person in such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material existence. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general, for their conditional life is very much troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world. So wonderful, so beautiful, so succinct. And what our spiritual teachers have taught us is the prime benediction to clearing the heart of all the dust accumulated of material illusion is the hearing and chanting. So we take those words of our spiritual masters to heart, and even though we are completely bewildered and illusioned by material nature, and we read these words sometimes and we don't understand it, or we don't even understand what our teachers will teach us. We have the faith, a little bit of faith, to say, okay, I will pick up my guitar and I will chant Krishna's names, and I will listen, and I will sing, and I will take that medicine for because I'm really sick and I don't know what is going on in this world, and I will sing Krishna's names, and we are happy doing that. And as we become more and more happy, the light comes up over the mountains of the darkness of the material world, and we start to perceive things for what they really are. And then the words of the Bhagavad Gita come to life in our heart. Thank you very much. Let's chant. Low. Namo Siddha Swarupananda Paramahamsa Nami Swarupaya Radha Krishna Society Swarupananda Paramahamsa Kamini Swarupaya Radha Krishna Society Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Gadadhara Srivasudeva Bhaktavrinda Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Haribol, thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you well and also remind you that on our YouTube channel, we do have a YouTube channel for Yoga Kirtan Hawaii, so please take that opportunity to hop over there and subscribe and to like the videos that we share there. We're constantly uploading videos there. We also have a lot of the videos on our Facebook page, library, and if you are interested in more of the yoga wisdom, I would recommend going to sif.org, where you can find wonderful articles about Bhakti Yoga and the science of the Bhagavad Gita. And till then, we'll see you next time. Okay, namaste.